Here in a second, so just let me know because it's time. Anyways, hey folks, welcome once again. This is Colonel Stan Scrabbit. I am the director of the Northeast Region Recruiting and Retention, and with me we have Lieutenant Colonel Darin Ninness, who is the National Recruiting and Retention Manager. And tonight, Darin is going to be talking about numbers, all the cool numbers that you have that you're aiming for. So, Darin, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, Stan. I'm doing pretty well, and hopefully I can give a good presentation here this evening without giving anybody an aneurysm or something like that.
Nah, I think we're going to be fine. So
good.
So, before you get started, what are you trying to? What's your goal here? What are you trying to do?
So tonight, what we're going to be talking about is what I like to call the magic number, and this is something I kind of came up with on the fly one day. Honest to God, I was literally standing in the shower one morning, and I went, "Wait a minute," because I was trying to come up with what my unit needed for a recruiting goal and how many we needed to recruit for each of our open house periods. We only do 2 recruiting periods a year because we're in a cohort model. So I said, geez, I don't even know quite where we're at right now. And it hit me that, I know exactly what our national average is for retention. I know approximately what my squadron average is for retention. So I should be able to sort of calculate, I should be able to back into a number that tells me, hey, you expect to lose about this many people this year based on our historical averages. So then you should be able to figure out what numbers you're going to need to go forward, where your targets and your goals are. And I literally, I wasn't dripping wet, but I literally ran downstairs after I got dressed and scribbled this out on a piece of paper and spent 10 minutes figuring it out for my unit. And it was really quick and easy to figure out. It was something that you can kind of do, I won't say on the back of an envelope, but relatively straightforwardly. And you don't need a spreadsheet. You don't necessarily need, advanced math or access database or anything like that. It's just something you can sit down, look at e-services, use some numbers that we already have, and calculate an approximation of what you're going to need to do to recruit to meet your growth goals.
Very cool. Well, we're going to get started here in just a second, but just a couple housekeeping things that we need to point out. First of all, if you have any questions, I have the question module thrown up. You can find a button in the top upper right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on that, you'll be able to ask some questions. You can do it that way. The other thing that I will be monitoring is I will be monitoring Twitter and keeping an eye on the hashtag CAP recruiting. So #CAP recruiting. Feel free to ask a question either way, and I'll even throw out another way. The chat that we have on this main page, you can also put a question or comment in the chat. Matter of fact, I would be grateful if you just check in and let me know that you're here. So type something in the chat, and we will turn it over to Colonel Ninness. So Colonel Ninness, go ahead and share your screen. I'll let you know when it's up, and you then may begin.
Outstanding, Stan. Am I live?
I am presenting to everyone, and you are live.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit about what your magic number is and exactly what your unit has for a magic number, so you can calculate what your specific unit needs to do for recruiting in the coming year until the end of the fiscal year, whatever it is exactly. So the big question is what is a magic number? I kind of came up with this term magic number off the top of my head. Simply put, the magic number is just how many members you need to recruit based on your expected losses. And it starts with your actual personnel strength and calculates it based on the retention averages that we have nationally. You can also certainly do this with your wings numbers. Doesn't really matter. I just caution everybody that as you go lower in the echelons, your number tends to shift a little bit more. It tends to be a little more fluid. So you may wind up chasing your tail a little bit. So it can be a factor. The purpose, though, is to gauge, recruiting progress. We get a lot of questions all the time. People say, well, how do I know what I'm doing? I'm recruiting, but I don't know if I've met my goal. Is there a yardstick I can gauge it against? And I know I certainly had an issue when I said to a squadron commander one time, you do realize that you've lost about 16 cadets over the last year and you've recruited 2. And that squadron commander looked at me with this kind of blank look and went, how do you know that? And I don't know that. And I said, well, geez, I just looked at your roster. But, the fact remains is there's ways to figure this kind of thing out. So this is how you kind of stick a stake in the sand and you're able to say, okay, this is where we're going to start and we're going to gauge our progress based on this. So the first things first is you use e-services to get your basic data to start with. You just click into your unit roster. It's usually under the membership report. Everybody can get there. And it shows you pretty much everybody in the unit, their join date and their renewal date. So keep in mind that we have some assumptions also with the magic number, the calculations we're going to make here. The assumption is you're keeping or losing personnel at somewhere around the national average. Everybody knows averages are half the units are going to be doing better and half the units are going to be doing worse. The question is where your unit is on that continuum. So if you're doing a little bit better, you're going to actually have better magic number, or actually you're going to do better against that magic number. If you're doing worse than the national average, you need to step it up a little bit. So the assumption also here is that we're supporting about a 5% growth rate. We're going to keep it modest, 5%. Most units can grow at 5%. A lot of squadrons will say, oh, we're going to grow our squadron 50% this year. I've been in Civil Air Patrol about 35 years. I'm here to tell you, most units can't support that kind of growth. A lot of units can't even support a 10% growth rate. So keep it modest, keep it simple. Let's grow slowly, let's grow cautiously, let's grow in a supportable way. That's important. And then make sure the basis that you're using, whether it's calendar or fiscal, is the same when you do how many members you've recruited. So if you say, okay, I need to look at my fiscal year, don't look at just from January 1 until now for how many people you've recruited. You need to go back to 1 October of the previous year. So keep your calendar bases straightforward as part of the process here. So let's calculate it. First things first, you want to calculate your first year cadets. We retain first year cadets slightly differently than we retain what I call subsequent or non-first year cadets. So first year cadets, they're the new ones in the organization. They haven't been in a year, and they leave at a pretty frightening rate. I hate to say that. Right now, the first year retention rate is about 23%. So first thing to do is log into e-services and look at that unit roster, and you'll see, it'll tell you how many members you have in your unit, cadet and senior. And you can scroll through the pages. Now I happen to pick a random unit. I just sort of clicked into a random units roster, and I happen to get one that fit on one page. So that was handy. And I looked through and I said, okay, how many people on this list have joined in the last 12 months? So this unit, out of its 13 cadet members, 4 of its cadet members have joined in the last 12 months. There's 4 cadets in their first membership year. Okay, so once you calculate how many cadets you have in that first year of membership, you want to multiply that number by about 23%, which is our current first year retention rate. That number fluctuates a little bit, 24, 25, maybe down to 22. It moves a little bit. It doesn't move a lot. So in this instance, 4 cadets by 0.23 gives me 0.92. Now we know we don't have 9/10 of a cadet. So to make our calculations easier, to make life easier, let's round this number up to 1. This squadron is going to keep 1 cadet out of those 4 new cadets. That's if they're doing right on the average. If they're doing worse than the average, they're going to lose all 4 of them. That's terrible. If they're doing better than that, they'll probably keep 2. They might even keep 3. But in this instance, let's use the number based on the national average. They're going to lose they're going to lose 3 cadets, and they're going to keep 1 cadet of those first year cadets. Now we're going to calculate the subsequent year cadets after that, or the non-first year cadets. I keep saying subsequent year cadets, and that's a big word. So If you subtract the 4 first-year cadets from this example squadron's 13 cadets, 9 of the cadets in the unit aren't in their first year. So we're going to multiply that number by the 54%, which is the current non-first year retention rate. And again, this number fluctuates a little bit. Sometimes it goes up closer to 60%. Sometimes it's down about 53%. It just varies, and it does move on a fairly frequent basis. So 9 times 54% comes out to 4.86. Now, obviously, again, we don't have 0.8 of a cadet, so we're going to round that number up to 5. So we're going to estimate that this unit is going to keep 5 of its 9 non-first year cadets. So they're going to lose about 4. So like I said before, this is based on the national retention averages nationally. So your unit might be doing a bang-up job of retention, so you'll actually do a little bit better than the numbers shown here. Then again, if your unit's having a retention problem, you're going to do worse. So now we're going to put this magic number together. We're going to take those 2 loss numbers, the first year and the non-first year cadets. We're going to add them together. 3 and 4 is 7. I like to keep this simple. I'm not a math whiz. So this unit, just to replace the expected losses, needs to recruit 7 cadets. This is not even calculating growth. So now we want to calculate the growth. So we're going to put it together here. 7 times 1.05, that's going to give us 5% growth, is 7.35. Now again, we don't have 0.3 of a cadet, so let's just round it up to keep it nice and even. They're going to need to recruit 8 cadets to grow the unit at a modest 5%. And that's actually probably closer to 10% actually, but you know, with rounding. So in the unit example that we have here, this unit's only recruited 4 people so far. It's only got 4 new cadets this year. So it's got to recruit 4 more this year to make up for expected losses. So now the unit says, okay, we're what, 8 months into the fiscal year here, and we've recruited 4 cadets. Geez, we've got to get on the ball, and we've got to recruit 4 more in the next 4 months. Now I'm going to summarize the unit's data here in a table so you can kind of see what we've got going. Again, first year cadets, which retain at a 23% rate, their current strength of first year cadets is 4. We're going to expect that they're going to lose 3. Non-first year cadets, 9. We're going to expect they're going to lose 4. So with the 5% added on, their magic number becomes 8. So their progress so far, they've only recruited 4 new cadets, so they've got 4 to go. Now, when we talk about senior members, I didn't do senior members as specifically as I did cadets here because we don't have a first year versus non-first year for senior members. Senior members retain at about a 73% rate. Again, if your unit's doing a bang-up job of training, if you're doing a great job of engaging your membership, you're going to do better than that, and that's super. Then again, if you're not doing that great of a job at engaging your membership, you're going to do worse. So this unit has 5 senior members, and we expect in that first year they're going to lose 1. So, correction, not in that first year. In this year, they're going to lose 1 senior member. Again, you can't calculate on tenths of a member, so I just rounded it up. For growth purposes, that unit needs to recruit 2 senior members. So they've recruited 1 so far. They need to bring in a 2nd senior member to meet their senior member growth rate. So this is just an expected growth number. It's not a flat replacement. This is 5%. I'm calculating it based on 5% here. If you wanted your unit to stay exactly the same, then you don't add the 5%. But who wants that? You want your unit to grow. Growth is what we need. So the question also becomes, should the unit use a fiscal or a calendar year? Well, of course, that depends on you. Determining who's in their first year doesn't really matter. You're going to look at your roster, and everybody whose membership join date was less than 12 months ago, they are in their first year. But if your headquarters is saying, hey, look, we're going to calculate all of our retention numbers, all of our strength numbers, all of our recruiting progress numbers based on fiscal year versus calendar year, you want to make sure that you are going in and calculating the people who have joined since 1 October versus the people who have joined since 1 January. So just make sure you're using the same basis date. This trips me up all the time because I sometimes forget, and the next thing I know, I'm in there thinking, wow, we didn't recruit a whole lot of people. Then I go, whoops, I missed 3 whole months in the previous year. So make sure you're using the right number of joins or the right basis for your calculations. Now, can you find unit retention data? Yes, you can. People ask me this all the time. Well, what's my unit's specific retention data? Commanders, personnel officers, and a number of other staff officers in the unit have access to the member statistical report in the reports section of e-services. This member statistical report will show you a number of monthly data points based on your unit. You'll see your monthly growth, your annual growth, monthly recruiting, annual recruiting, and retention. And again, these numbers are fairly fluid because they're based on comparing averages back to a year ago. And obviously, like for example, I'll tell you straight out, this is my unit, and yes, it doesn't look like we had a good monthly growth because in April is when we lose all of our cohorts. So our April to May number is terrible. It always looks awful. And that doesn't account for things like late renews and things like that. But on the far right of that member statistical report, you can see your renewal percentage. The problem with this number is at the moment, it is not sussing out first year renewals versus subsequent year renewals. So you're just seeing sort of an aggregate or a composite number of renewals of all cadets. So you can also pull this number up for senior members. I didn't do it in this example here, but you can also, this report is generated based on either cadets or seniors. You can't do it together. So I'm working on seeing if we can't make this report show us first year versus non-first year cadets so we can more accurately calculate these things. Some caveats here that to keep in mind. This number does change and it does adjust as your unit strength changes during the course of the year. So, you know, if your unit and back in October, you know, you had 25 cadets in their first year, but by February, you only had 12 cadets that were in their first year. This is going to change a little bit. This is going to change your numbers a little. I wouldn't go calculating this number weekly or even monthly. I would just calculate this number, you know, a couple times a year, 3-4 times a year, you know, to sit down with your commander as a how goes it. And keep in mind, again, if you're recruiting, if you're doing better, your recruiting numbers are going to be better. You're going to show that your magic number says we should recruit, you know, 20 cadets this year. And look, we recruited 22. Well, that's partly because you're retaining better. But on the flip side, of course, if you've got below average retention, even with that 5 or 10% growth tacked on, you may not see a substantial growth or any growth. You may see your number still in the positive. That means you got to step up your retention effort, and it means you have to step up your recruiting effort. Geez, Stan, that was awfully quick on my part. I'm curious if there's any questions. Has anybody asked us how we're doing here?
No questions so far. But if I may,
Sure.
one of the things that you talked about is calendar year versus fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at things from a calendar year perspective. That just works in my head. I work from January to December a lot better. So for the folks that are in the Northeast region, you know, that's what I'm aiming for. So if you want to sync up with me, I'm looking at calendar year and how we are moving from there. So I'll let you know if that changes. So
sure. But, and keep in mind too that, you know, national from a funding perspective and things like that, they operate on a fiscal year basis. So there is a tendency to look at numbers on a fiscal year basis, particularly when reporting to the Air Force.
Right. So I may have to change my ways. So
yeah, well, or just, you know, when you're reporting to hire, it's a matter of just knowing, okay, I have to look at fiscal year, but I'm doing everything based on calendar.
Yeah. And if you wanted to stop your presentation anytime there, Colonel Ninness, you feel free to. So
heck, let me see if I'm.
Although, you know, talking about how you got this idea. That thought is
Hey.
still in my head. So,
am I back here?
You are back.
Oh, so, good.
Hey, one of the things that I would like to show is kind of where we're at, the goals, recruiting and retention goals, from my perspective, right? Sure. What I'm tracking, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what you got. This is an awesome opportunity for you to share with other recruiting and retention officers and directors, how you're doing it. Now, some people take over the job and they're like, I've got nothing here to start with. So this is always a great opportunity to share and let somebody see, what's coming out, who's doing it what way.
Yeah. So the way that I pretty much is, you are looking at it as, okay, I'm going to lose bodies, so I need to get all these extra bodies. For me, I'm looking at the final result, right? So here we have the information for the Northeast region, and in this green column is basically the numbers for each of the wings. I've calculated how many units are in each of those wings. And so what I did is I'm looking at total numbers. So, looking at Connecticut wing, for example, they started out with 699. And in order to meet 5%, that would be 734. They need to move from 699 to 734. Yep. Now, as Colonel Ninness explained, they're going to lose a lot of bodies, right? So they don't just need to get 35 members. They have also got to replace all those people that dropped off, which is what he was calculating. So you're not just aiming, in this case, just for 35 people. You're aiming for a lot more. Okay,
right. So it's replaced that. It's replaced those losses. It's looking at the losses, because a lot of people think, oh, I just have to recruit 20 more people. Well, no, you got to recruit 20 more people, but you're going to lose a bunch of people too.
Right. So as we move on, I also calculated a 10% goal. If you're going to have a stretch goal, let's go for a stretch goal. And I think a stretch goal is 10%. 5% is a challenging goal for a lot of wings. 10% could be pretty darn tough. But it's still out there. So if you hit the 5%, that doesn't mean it's time to coast. That means, okay, let's aim for the 10%. Okay, and we head for that. So what I've figured this out is the total number to recruit. So as I said, Connecticut wing, the next column over, 35, which would be the total number that you have to recruit to get 5%, and the total number that you have to recruit at 10% would be 70. Well, based on the number of individuals in the unit, or number of units, so 16 units, to get 5%, they would be aiming for 2 members for a 5% goal, or 4 members each unit for a 4% goal, right? So yep. That's what I'm aiming at. That 70 people is a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, this is a huge elephant. But if you realize you've got 16 units that can contribute to this, the bites are a lot smaller. All I need you to do is grow your unit 4 additional people, and we will have achieved that 10% goal if every unit goes out and gets 4 additional from their number. Now understand, as Colonel Ninness has been pointing out, you're going to have losses. So you have to take that into account. But so this is not a heavy lift if you look at it that way.
No, it's not.
So currently we're sitting at, here's the column from May that I pull out, on 1 June, right? So I plug those numbers in. And so now these other columns tell me how far we have to go. And right now, for Connecticut wing, they need 9 members out of that 35. They need 9 more to go in order to hit their 5% goal. And we are only halfway there. Right? So this is potentially achievable to hit this in the next 6 months. In order to get to their 10% goal, a little heavier lift, they got to get 44 bodies. Okay. Right now, Vermont wing is sitting at 0. And here should be next month, if everything goes well and they don't lose a lot of bodies and they keep recruiting at the pace they're at, they should meet their goal. And their goal wasn't a heavy lift. It was 10 bodies. So they're on pace to get to a 10% goal, and they're tracking that way. So I see a couple units that are making good progress to their 10% goal. Some of the wings, I think it's a heavier lift. Not impossible, but if they go out and talk to each of the units, I think there is something that can happen. So
absolutely. You know, something to think about, Stan, a lot of people don't realize this, is that what this really underscores is that retention is really, 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 I can't underscore this. It's really important because, you know, you've gone out and you've recruited, you've spent money, you know, unit recruiting costs money in one way or another, whether it's in creating, you know, new member materials, whether it's in mailing stuff down to national headquarters, whether it's printing flyers for your recruiting, whatever that is. You've spent money and training time, and your training time hasn't really got a specific dollar value associated with it. I mean, it does because it's volunteer time, but when you think about it, you know, the retention is important because you've just taken somebody, spent, say, 3 or 4 months training them, and then you let them walk out the back of your door, and now you have to do it all over again. And not only do you have to do it all over again, but to grow, you got to do it all over again +1. So, you know, a lot of folks don't, they want to talk to me about recruiting and recruiting and recruiting, and hey, what about recruiting? And that's fine, but let's talk about the quality of your unit and the quality of your program and the quality of the things you're doing, because that's what's the stuff that's keeping the people at your unit, keeping them engaged, keeping them busy, and keeping them doing things.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to businesses also. You ask an owner of a business, what does he prefer? People that keep coming back,
right,
or having to go out and get new people?
Right. It's always easy.
And it's always better to have people invested in you keep coming back than having to go out and constantly chase down new people. So I agree.
Yeah.
Keep the retention. So
that's exactly it. And that's, you know, like I said, that's something that I hate to say it, but when I have these conversations, a lot of times, you know, they concentrate on, you know, give me tips and tricks and hints and ideas of what I can do for recruiting. Well, okay, but if we're stuffing people in the front door, sort of, you know, we're filling the pipeline, but the unit isn't fulfilling anybody's needs. They're not satisfying anybody's membership goals. You know, people come in the door, they look at the unit, they go, oh yeah, this is nice, not what I'm looking for, and leave because, you know, the unit's either not interesting or they were promised, you know, they were told Civil Air Patrol is going to be something that it's not. Then we need to, you know, units can address that as well. And that's something I can't address that. I can't go out to every unit in the country and say, hey, stop doing an hour and a half worth of drill, you know, once a month, or, you know, 4 nights a month. You know, please do something that's more engaging for your membership. I can't do that to every unit. So the unit has to actually go out and do that themselves. So it's just something that's important that people realize, because like I said, a lot of times they concentrate on the recruiting aspect and very little on the retention aspect, and the retention aspect is actually a little more insidious.
Very good. All right, folks, we're going to start wrapping it up. If you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that, feel free to let us know.
I was looking at Twitter fall. I'm not seeing much.
Here's a question from Tom Brown. He said he can't read my spreadsheet. Sorry about that, Tom. Who has access to your spreadsheet that you are discussing by wing? Well, the directors of recruiting and retention at the wing level have that. So they can do that. Do I break it down by group? No, sir, I do not. I am hoping that the wings are managing their program and taking care of those details. Mm-hmm. But you know, hopefully you could kind of follow the discussion, you know, through the spreadsheet. This was I would have done a better job with that spreadsheet, but trust me, it was 2 minutes before we went on air that I said, "Hey, Colonel Ninness, can I show this?" And he said yes. So that was my fault, and I suppose we could beef it up a little bit to show you, but basically the idea is I'm looking at 5 and 10% growth based on what the numbers were in January. And right now at a halfway point, I'm pretty comfortable at where we're at. Although I do know summer things have typically trickled off during the summer, but I also know in fall it ramps back up. So I'm sitting at a reasonable comfort level, looking at the numbers, where we've been. I'm pretty good. Well, 1 July will tell me an interesting story. So we're kind of tracking that. So hopefully that answered your question. Hey, before we go off, one of the things that I wanted to mention was our next presentation is going to be on the 26th of July. And what I'm going to talk about are setting smart recruiting goals. Talking about this concept called OKRs. Google used it, and they seem to do pretty good. So it's a strategy that I like. I use it for my teams at work. I've started using it in CAP, and I like the results it gets because it allows us to really hone in on what we're trying to achieve, and we can break it down into quarterly bits so it becomes more manageable, and we'll talk about all of that. So so that's what we got going on in July. So July 26th, another presentation at 2000 hours, and I'm good. Thank you once again. Oh, question. We have a question.
Oh.
So are the PowerPoint pages available to download or review later? I am confident that Colonel Ninness is going to put them up on the website, up on the repository.
I certainly will.
And we will share that back out in the chat on the main site, so we can point you right to those things.
And don't forget that immediately after this presentation is over with, the entire presentation is available as a YouTube video from the link that you visited to get to the presentation. So if you want to look at this presentation again, you absolutely can. If you want to share this presentation with everybody in your squadron, or your squadron commander, or your group commander, or whoever, yeah, go right ahead and do that.
Okay. And back to Tom. Tom says likes the spreadsheet, wants to help, but was not aware of it. So Group 6, Recruiting and Retention Officer. Group 6 is where? Don't know. Tom, where are you from? We will put the link out there. So, but check in with your wing recruiting and retention director. He should be able to help you out, or she. Yep. And Bob Felker, that main site, we will put a link on this particular Google site, so you can get it there. And also, this link will be added to the Northeast Region Recruiting and Retention documents, and you can find that on the site.
And I'll get this presentation uploaded to the repository right now.
PA Wing, thank you, Tom Brown. Yeah, check with Colonel Lee and, see if he's in a sharing mood, and he may share some of the stuff that I've been sharing with him. So I don't know if it's top secret information. If it is, I'm going to jail. But you have that. So I think knowledge is power, that the more transparent we make everything, then we know what goals that we're chasing, and we can be more successful. So very good. All right, folks, it has been an absolute pleasure. I learned some cool stuff, and I hope you did. Colonel Ninness, thank you very much for coming out and giving this wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I really appreciate what we're doing here and what you've done with making recruiting, taking these presentations and putting these out so that everybody can share them and everybody can see them, and it's it's a great opportunity. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Stan.
All right, we just keep plugging. So, all right, very good. Thanks, everybody. We will catch you later. Colonel Ninness, if you hang on while I close this up.
Will do.